The galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars, endless planets, and civilizations older than human history itself. Among all of them, the Galactic Empire stood as the strongest. Its rule stretched across more than half the known galaxy. To most species, the Empire was not just a government, it was a force of nature, a power that could not be resisted. The symbol of the Empire's might was its grand fleet, known across the stars as the Iron Tide. It was a name whispered with fear in marketplaces, in backwater colonies, and even in the halls of rival governments. The Iron Tide was not simply a group of warships. It was an unstoppable armada. The fleet contained thousands of ships, each the size of cities, built with weapons capable of reducing entire planets into lifeless rocks. No battle had ever been lost by the Iron Tide. Every rebellion that rose was crushed. Every enemy that dared to fight was erased from history. To see the fleet in the sky was to know that doom had arrived. For millennia, this had been the way of the galaxy. None had challenged it, and none had survived those who tried. On the edge of the Empire's territory, there was a small human colony on a planet called Erebos 9. The colony was not rich, not powerful, and not even very important in terms of resources. But the people of Erebos 9 had done something unthinkable. They had refused to pay the heavy tribute demanded by the Empire. It was not out of pride, but out of desperation. The taxes had become too high, the demands too cruel. They chose to risk rebellion rather than starve in obedience. The message reached the imperial capital, and within days, the decision was made. The Empire would not tolerate even a small act of disobedience. A single spark, they believed, could lead to a fire of resistance. To prevent that, they sent the strongest answer possible, the Iron Tide itself. The armada moved like a storm across space. Massive carriers, heavy destroyers, sleek cruisers, and endless swarms of fighters gathered together. Each ship was a masterpiece of alien engineering, polished and perfected after thousands of years of war. At the center of it all was the flagship, a vessel so massive it could be seen from orbit with the naked eye. Its hull was forged from black metal that reflected no light, and its weapons glowed with destructive energy. It was said to hold enough power to split a planet in half. When the news spread that the Iron Tide was on its way, fear gripped the entire region. Neighboring colonies packed their belongings and fled into deep space. Merchants closed their trade routes. Even local governors from other worlds sent urgent messages to the humans, surrender before it was too late. But Erebos 9 had no choice. They could not pay. They could not run. And so they prepared for the end. Yet not all humans believed the battle was already lost. Far away from the colony, in the silent blackness of space, a single human vessel waited. Compared to the grand ships of the Empire, this craft was small, almost fragile. From a distance, it looked like an ordinary ship, plain and simple in design. But inside, it carried secrets that would change the galaxy forever. This ship was called the Dauntless. The Dauntless was not part of any large human fleet, because humanity did not possess such fleets. Their colonies were scattered, their technology far less advanced than the ancient empires that surrounded them. But what they lacked in numbers and size, they made up for with creativity. Humans were builders, thinkers, survivors. They did not rely on tradition. They invented. They adapted. They dared to test the impossible. The commander of the Dauntless was Elias Kane, a man who had spent his entire life in the quiet corners of human space. He was not a famous war hero. He was not born into power or privilege, but he carried within him the same spirit that had always driven humanity forward. The refusal to kneel, even when the enemy was stronger. As the Iron Tide closed in on Erebos 9, Kane stood at the bridge of his ship. Around him, his crew worked silently, their faces pale but determined. Each of them knew the truth. The Dauntless was all that stood between the Empire's wrath and the survival of their people. No other reinforcements would come. Humanity's scattered colonies had no armies, no powerful allies. If the Dauntless failed, Erebos 9 would burn, and the message to the rest of humanity would be clear. Resistance was hopeless. The crew of the Dauntless had no illusions. Their ship was small, and the fleet they faced was beyond imagination. But Kane carried a weapon the Empire had never faced before. Not a super laser, not a massive cannon, but something far more dangerous. A mind willing to try the impossible. The Dauntless had been outfitted with experimental technologies developed in secret human research stations. These were inventions considered unstable, even reckless. Other species would have dismissed them as untested foolishness. But humanity had never survived by playing safe. They had always gambled everything when pushed against the wall. The ship's engines could bend space in ways the Empire had never imagined, allowing the Dauntless to vanish and reappear in sudden bursts. Its weapons were not built for brute force but for precision, devices designed to bypass shields, drones that could adapt in the middle of battle, and energy bursts that targeted systems instead of hulls. The Dauntless was not a hammer. It was a scalpel, and Kane intended to use it where it hurt the most. Still, as he stared out at the distant stars, Kane knew the truth. They were only one ship against thousands. The odds were beyond reason, yet something inside him refused to surrender to despair. Humanity had always been underestimated, always dismissed as weak by the great empires of the galaxy. Perhaps that was their strength. No one ever expected them to fight back. As the iron tide drew closer, Kane gave a quiet order. "Prepare the ship." "We are not running." The crew obeyed without question. Their hands moved over the controls, their voices calm but firm. Each of them knew what was at stake. They were not just fighting for Arrivos 9. They were fighting for the right of humanity to exist without chains. Far away, on the command deck of the Empire's flagship, the High Admiral of the Iron Tide watched as reports came in. His golden eyes narrowed at the mention of a lone human ship standing in their path. He let out a cold laugh. "One ship? Is this their defense? Then let us make an example so perfect that no other world dares defy us again." And so, the greatest fleet in galactic history moved forward, certain of its victory. But in the quiet black of space, the Dauntless waited, and humanity's fight for survival was about to begin. The galaxy was wide and full of wonders, but for Daniel Cross, a human diplomat, it often felt like humans were just a whisper in a storm. They were new to the interstellar stage, and though Earth had joined the Council of Races only a decade ago, humans were often treated as if they were children playing in the halls of giants. Still, Daniel did his duty. He wore his plain uniform, kept his words polite, and tried to show the strength of humanity not through power but through patience. That morning, Daniel stood at the summit hall of the Grand Stellar Council. The chamber was massive, carved from crystal that reflected 1,000 shades of light. Delegates from dozens of species filled the hall with their robes, armor, feathers, scales, and strange glowing forms. Daniel stood quietly near the back, making notes on his small tablet while greater powers debated matters of war, trade, and alliance. Most of the time, no one noticed him. Humans had no vast fleets, no ancient empires, no legendary armies. But Daniel had grown used to that. He knew his role: to listen, to observe, and when needed, to speak for his people. As the council argued about border disputes between two alien warlords, Daniel felt a gentle tug at his sleeve. Surprised, he looked down and saw a young girl, though she was clearly not human. Her eyes were wide and luminous like twin orbs of violet light. Her skin shimmered faintly, like starlight caught in water, and delicate lines traced her cheeks as if the universe itself had drawn constellations there. She looked no more than 10 years old in human years. Though Daniel knew appearances among alien species could be misleading, she wore a simple gown of silver fabric and a small crown rested on her head. "Human," she whispered, her voice soft yet urgent. "Please come with me." Daniel blinked. Forgive me, but who are you?" The girl looked around nervously, then leaned closer. "I am Princess Lyra of the Orolith Dominion, and I beg you to listen. It is very important." Daniel froze. The Orolith Dominion was one of the greatest powers in the galaxy, ruled by the Empress Lyra, a leader both feared and respected. To be addressed by her daughter was no small matter. "What do you need from me, Princess?" Daniel asked gently, lowering his voice so the others would not overhear. Her small hands tightened around his sleeve. Her eyes shone with emotion, almost trembling, and then she spoke words that would change his life forever. "Human, my mother must have a husband, and I beg for a father. Please marry her and rule the galaxy." For a moment Daniel thought he had misheard. The noise of the council faded from his ears. He could only stare at the child, his heart pounding. "What?" he whispered. Lyra's gaze was steady, though her voice shook. "The Empire is in danger. Many warlords wish to marry my mother, not because they love her, but because they want the throne. If she chooses any of them, war will come. The galaxy will burn, but you are different. You are human, neutral, no faction controls you. You care in a way they do not. Please, I do not want war. I do not want to lose my mother. Please marry her. Please be my father. Daniel's mind spun. He was just an ambassador, a man who delivered speeches and wrote reports. He had never commanded fleets, never ruled planets, never dreamed of thrones. And now a child was begging him to take a place beside one of the most powerful rulers in the galaxy. He knelt to her level, trying to keep his voice calm. Princess, that is not a small request. Marriage is more than politics. And I am not sure your mother would even— She will listen, Lyra said quickly, though tears shimmered in her eyes. She has carried the Empire alone for too long. She is strong, but she is tired. She needs someone who will not betray her. I know she will see you are different. I can feel it. Daniel's chest tightened. There was something about the child's sincerity, the raw hope in her words that cut deeper than any formal speech ever could. She was not speaking as a princess, but as a daughter desperate to save her mother. Before Daniel could reply, a sharp voice called from across the chamber. Princess Lyra! A pair of Orolith guards hurried toward them, clad in shimmering armor. They bowed to the girl but glared at Daniel with suspicion. One spoke in a low, firm tone. Princess, you must not wander. Come with us at once. Lyra squeezed Daniel's hand before stepping back. Her violet eyes locked on his. Please, human. Come to the palace. Speak to my mother. Do not ignore my plea. And then she was gone, swept away by the guards, leaving Daniel standing in stunned silence. The rest of the council session passed in a blur. Daniel could not focus on the debates. His mind replayed the princess's words again and again. Marry her and rule the galaxy. It sounded absurd, like something from a fable. And yet the urgency in her eyes was real. That evening, in his private quarters aboard the human embassy ship, Daniel sat staring at the stars outside the window. He had lived his life with discipline and reason, but now emotion warred within him. He remembered the princess's trembling voice, her plea not for power, but for peace. Could a child see something the galaxy's mighty warlords could not? Could a human truly play such a role? Daniel told himself it was impossible. He was no ruler. He was just a man, and yet, the next day, his answer came not by choice but by summons. A messenger from the Orolith Dominion arrived at the embassy, bearing a crystal seal of the Empress herself. Ambassador Cross, the messenger said, bowing Her Majesty Empress Celera requests your presence at the Imperial Palace. Daniel felt his heart lurch. The princess had spoken true. Celera had heard, and now he would face the Empress herself. He prepared his uniform with care, his hands steady though his thoughts swirled. When the transport ship lifted him through the starry lanes toward the Dominion's shining capital, Daniel knew his life was no longer his own. For in the heart of the galaxy, a child's plea had chosen him. The capital world of the Orolith Dominion was unlike anything Daniel Cross had ever seen. From orbit, it glowed like a living jewel, its oceans reflecting golden light from the twin suns, its continents shaped with elegant symmetry by centuries of careful design. Towers of crystal and silver stretched into the skies, and vast energy bridges linked floating islands above the seas. It was a world built not just for survival but for beauty, power, and display. As the human transport descended through the bright clouds, Daniel sat quietly, his hands folded in his lap. His heart beat steadily, though his thoughts stormed within him. He was an ambassador, yes, but this was different. Today he would meet Empress Celera, the woman whose word could decide the fate of entire star systems. The memory of the princess's plea still burned in his mind.
Marry her and rule the galaxy.
Daniel shook his head softly. The very thought was impossible. Surely this meeting would be nothing more than a polite formality. The Empress would thank him for watching over her daughter, perhaps, and then send him on his way. And yet a quiet voice in his heart whispered that fate was moving in ways he did not yet understand. The ship landed within a great landing court shaped like a star, guarded by shining towers. Soldiers stood in formation, their armor reflecting the suns. Daniel walked down the ramp, feeling their eyes upon him. He was a stranger here, a human in a world where humans were rare. Still, he kept his posture calm, his steps steady. A tall officer in silver robes bowed stiffly. Ambassador Cross, the Empress awaits you, Daniel nodded. Lead the way. They passed through towering gates carved with glowing symbols that shifted like living light. Beyond lay the Imperial Palace, a structure so vast it seemed to merge with the horizon. Its walls gleamed with a mixture of crystal and stone, and rivers of light flowed through channels that lined the floors, glowing softly beneath his steps. The halls were filled with courtiers, nobles, and servants, all pausing to watch the human who had been summoned by their ruler. Some whispered, some laughed quietly, others simply stared with cold, unreadable eyes. Finally, the officer led Daniel into a grand chamber. The ceiling soared high above, painted with a moving map of the stars. At the far end stood the throne, carved from living crystal that pulsed with energy. Upon it sat Empress Celira. Daniel had seen hollows of her before, but they did not compare to the reality. She was tall and graceful, her presence commanding. Her skin shone faintly like her daughter's, though the patterns of light across her cheeks were more intricate, like galaxies spinning in her gaze. She wore robes of deep blue and silver, a crown of starlight resting upon her brow. Her eyes, sharp, intelligent, weary yet unyielding, fell upon him the moment he entered. Daniel bowed respectfully, one hand over his chest. "Your Majesty." The Empress studied him for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was calm, rich, and strong. "So this is the human who has stirred my daughter's heart." Daniel raised his head slowly. "If I have caused trouble, I beg forgiveness." "I did not seek to—" Celira lifted her hand, silencing him. "You misunderstand. Trouble is the nature of politics, not of you. My daughter has always been bold, but this time her boldness has carried her far indeed. She speaks of you, human. She says you are fit to stand beside me. She says you should marry me." The words hung in the chamber like a blade. Courtiers shifted, some gasped softly, some smirked. Daniel's breath caught, but he steadied himself. "I am honored by her trust," he said carefully. "But I am only a man, a diplomat. I do not claim to be fit for such a place." Celira leaned forward slightly, her gaze piercing. "That is precisely why I summoned you. Do you think I would simply laugh at her request? No, for in her words I sensed something more, perhaps a test for me, perhaps a lesson, or perhaps fate itself." Daniel met her gaze. "And what do you see in me, Your Majesty?" For a moment silence filled the hall. Then Celira stood, descending the steps of her throne with slow, deliberate grace. When she reached him, she circled him like a hawk measuring prey, or perhaps an equal. "You are not powerful," she said. "You do not command fleets. You do not command wealth. And yet you are here, standing calmly before me as if unafraid. That is unusual." Daniel gave a small smile. "I learned long ago fear changes nothing. Respect, honesty, and patience can do far more." Her lips curved faintly, almost a smile. "Words, many speak them. Few mean them." Before Daniel could answer, a sudden crash echoed through the chamber. The great doors burst open. A figure rushed in, an alien noble, tall and armored, his face set with anger. Behind him trailed guards who had clearly tried but failed to stop him. "Empress," the noble shouted. "This cannot stand. A human, a low-born creature from a young world? To even speak of such a one as consort is an insult to all houses. I demand this farce end now." Gasps filled the hall. Celira's eyes flashed coldly. But before she could respond, the noble drew a blade of searing light and pointed it at Daniel. "If the human wishes to stand in our presence," the noble sneered, "let him prove he is worthy of breath." The court froze. Guards moved, but too slowly. The noble lunged forward. Daniel's body moved without thought. He stepped aside, the blade missing him by inches. His hand caught a fallen staff from one of the startled guards, and he raised it just in time to block a second strike. The clash of light and steel rang through the chamber. The noble pressed hard, his strength far greater. But Daniel used speed and balance, dodging, deflecting. He remembered his training, not in war, but in defense and survival. He had never sought violence, but he had learned enough to endure. At last, he twisted the staff, knocking the blade from the noble's grasp. It clattered across the floor. Daniel held the staff steady, breathing hard, but did not strike back. "Enough," he said firmly. The noble snarled, but Celira's voice cut through the chamber like thunder. "Silence!" Guards rushed in, seizing the noble. Celira's eyes blazed. "You dare raise a weapon in my hall? You shame your house. Begone from my sight." As the noble was dragged away, Celira turned back to Daniel. For the first time, her expression softened. "You could have killed him," she said quietly. Daniel lowered the staff. Killing would prove nothing. Restraint is stronger. Celira studied him in silence. Then she gave the smallest nod. Perhaps my daughter was not wrong after all, the courtiers whispered among themselves. Some looked at Daniel with new respect. Others glared with resentment. But one thing was clear. The human had shown courage in the heart of the Empire. Celira returned to her throne. Human, you will remain as my guest in this palace. We shall see in time. If you are truly worthy to stand at my side, or if you are merely another whisper in the storm. Daniel bowed once more, his heart steady, though he knew the path ahead would be filled with trials. And as he left the chamber under the watchful eyes of nobles and guards, he caught sight of Princess Lyra standing at a balcony above. She smiled at him, her small hand raised in a silent gesture of trust. For Daniel, that smile meant more than crowns or thrones, but deep within the palace walls, in shadows unseen, voices whispered and knives were sharpened, for not all would accept a human in the halls of power. The days after Daniel Cross's meeting with Empress Celira passed quickly, but not peacefully. The palace of the Orolith Dominion was beautiful, with its shining halls of crystal, gardens of glowing flowers, and balconies that looked out over the silver seas of the capital world. Yet behind all the beauty, Daniel felt tension pressing against him like an invisible hand. Wherever he walked, he felt the stares of nobles and guards. Some were curious, some hostile, and some cold as stone. He was an outsider, a human among the stars. Still, he carried himself with calmness. Daniel had learned long ago that panic never solved anything. But in the quiet moments when he was alone in his chambers, he could not help but wonder if he had made a mistake by agreeing to stay. One evening, as he sat on the balcony watching the sun sink into the sea, he heard soft footsteps behind him. Human, a small voice said. Daniel turned. It was Princess Lyra. She wore a simple white dress, her small crown shining faintly in the fading light. Her violet eyes glowed softly, filled with both hope and worry. Princess, Daniel said warmly, you should not be wandering the palace alone. She shook her head quickly. I wanted to see you. The nobles talk in secret. They whisper that you are weak. Some say you should be removed before my mother even thinks of you. You must be careful. Daniel's expression grew serious. And you? Are you safe? Lyra hesitated, then walked closer. She took his hand in her small fingers. I am always surrounded by guards, but guards cannot stop fear. Only trust can do that, and I trust you. Her words touched him deeply. He squeezed her hand gently. Then I will do everything I can to protect you. That is my promise. Her eyes shone, and for the first time she whispered, I wish you were my father already. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to comfort her, but before he could answer, a sound from the shadows made him turn sharply. A courtier had been standing nearby, half hidden, watching them. The figure bowed quickly when Daniel met his gaze and slipped away into the halls. Lyra's hand trembled. They will twist everything. They will use even this against you. Daniel nodded slowly. He knew she was right. The next day, Daniel was invited to a council of nobles. He entered the great chamber, where dozens of lords and ladies sat in high seats shaped like thrones. Celira sat at the center, calm and composed. One noble, a tall man with sharp features and a cloak of feathers, rose to speak. His voice carried both pride and scorn. Empress, we gather here to demand an answer. Will you choose your consort from among us as tradition demands, or will you continue to entertain this human? Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. Celira lifted her hand, silencing them. I will choose when I am ready. Until then, none shall dictate my will. Another noble, an older woman with skin like bronze stone, sneered. Every day you delay, the warlords gather strength. They wait for weakness. If you do not unite us soon, they will tear the Dominion apart. Daniel listened quietly, feeling their eyes on him. He knew he could not speak out of turn here. This was Celira's battle, but deep down, he understood the truth of their words. The galaxy was trembling on the edge of chaos. When the council ended, Celira approached Daniel privately. Her face was calm, but her eyes were shadowed. You see the danger, she said softly. They circle me like predators. Each one wants power. None care for peace. My daughter believes you can be the answer. But do you? Or are you ready to flee back to Earth? Daniel met her gaze firmly. I am not a man who runs, Your Majesty, but I will not pretend. I am no warlord. I am no conqueror. If I can help you, it will not be with strength, but with what I know best. honesty, patience, and reason. Celira studied him. For a moment, the hardness in her eyes softened. Then she nodded. Perhaps that is exactly what we need. That night, Daniel received a secret message. It was delivered not through official channels but slipped under his chamber door. Written on a thin sheet of crystal, the words were simple. Leave this palace, human, or you will not live to see another sunrise. Daniel stared at the note for a long time. He felt no fear, only a deep sense of inevitability. He knew this was coming. Someone wanted him gone, and soon. The following day, Daniel visited the archives, a vast hall of knowledge where records of the Dominion's history and politics were kept. He hoped to learn more about the warlords who threatened Celira's throne. There he met a quiet scribe, a thin man with pale skin and nervous eyes. The scribe bowed quickly. Ambassador, you should not linger here alone. The shadows are full of ears. Daniel gave him a steady look. Do you know something I should hear? The scribe hesitated, then leaned closer, whispering, The nobles do not only quarrel, they plot. Several houses have already sworn in secret to overthrow the Empress if she does not choose one of their own soon. They speak of assassins, of fleets waiting just beyond the borders. Daniel's jaw tightened. And do they speak of me? The scribe swallowed hard. They see you as the greatest insult of all. A human consort would break their pride. Some whisper that killing you would end this foolish idea before it begins. Daniel thanked him quietly, though the scribe vanished quickly into the shelves, afraid even of his own words. Later that evening, Daniel walked once more with Princess Lyra in the palace gardens. The air was filled with the scent of glowing blossoms, and silver birds sang in the branches above. But Lyra's eyes were troubled. You heard something, she said softly. Daniel nodded. Yes, there are whispers of rebellion. Some want to see your mother fall. Her small hands clenched. Then we must stop them. You must stay, please. Without you, they will crush her. With you, there is hope. Daniel looked at her young face filled with such fierce courage. It pained him. She was only a child, yet she carried fears that no child should bear. I will stay, he said gently. But I must warn you, Lyra. The path ahead will be dangerous. She lifted her chin, her voice steady. Danger does not matter. Only family does. I already see you as mine. Daniel's heart tightened again. Her words gave him strength. That night, as he lay awake in his chamber, Daniel looked out at the stars. They were bright and endless, scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. But among them, he saw the shadows. Fleets gathering, warlords waiting, conspiracies taking root. He knew now that the princess's plea was not simply a child's wish. It was the cry of a galaxy in peril. If he turned away, if he left, millions could suffer. He was only a human. But sometimes the smallest voices could change the loudest storms. And so Daniel closed his eyes with one thought clear in his mind. He would not abandon the Empress. He would not abandon Lyra. No matter the shadows, no matter the stars. The Empress's decision came one morning like a storm breaking through the calm. Daniel Cross had just finished a quiet breakfast in his chamber when a servant in silver robes entered and bowed deeply. Ambassador, Her Majesty commands your presence in the Hall of Judgment. Daniel frowned. The Hall of Judgment? The servant's expression was careful, almost nervous. Today begins the trial of worthiness. The nobles demanded it. The Empress has agreed. Daniel's heart sank. He had heard whispers of such trials. Ancient tests once used to prove the worth of rulers and consorts. They were not simple contests of strength. They were trials of mind, heart, and spirit, designed to reveal the truth of a person's soul. Daniel rose slowly, straightening his plain ambassador's uniform. He had no armor, no crown, no weapon, only himself. Very well, he said quietly. Lead the way. The Hall of Judgment was vast, shaped like a circle of shining crystal. At its center stood a raised platform, glowing with lines of light. Around it, nobles filled tiered seats, their voices murmuring like a restless sea. Above them, banners of their houses shimmered with pride. At the highest seat, Empress Celira sat upon her throne. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with hidden fire. At her side stood Princess Lyra, who gripped the railing with small white hands, her eyes fixed on Daniel. When he entered, the hall grew silent. Every gaze turned to him, the outsider, the human. Celira's voice carried across the chamber, steady and strong. The Council of Nobles has demanded a trial. Let it be so. Today, those who would claim the right to stand at my side must prove themselves. Let all see their truth. One by one, alien warlords stepped onto the platform. They were towering figures clad in armor, heavy with weapons. Each boasted of their strength, their victories, their long lines of conquest. One split a steel pillar with a single blow of his fist. Another commanded fire to rise from his hands. Another summoned a beast of energy, forcing it to kneel before him. The nobles roared their approval. Pride, strength, dominance, these were the traditions they valued. Then it was Daniel's turn. He stepped onto the platform quietly, without weapon or armor. The hall buzzed with laughter and disbelief. "What will the human do?" one noble sneered. "Tell us a story? Sing us a song?" Celera raised her hand. "Silence. Let him show his worth." The first challenge began. The trial of mind. A puzzle of shifting lights appeared before Daniel, forming endless patterns, shapes, and traps. It was a game of strategy, one that had defeated even seasoned nobles. Daniel studied it calmly, his fingers moving over the controls. Where others forced the patterns with power, he watched carefully, patient, waiting for the design to reveal itself. Slowly, piece by piece, he shifted the lights into harmony. The puzzle glowed bright and then dissolved into silence. The nobles muttered. Some frowned. Some looked surprised. The second challenge began, the trial of heart. A hologram formed on the platform, two beings in danger, both calling for help. One was strong and powerful, able to offer great reward if saved. The other was weak and unknown, with nothing to give. The choice was clear to most. Save the strong, let the weak fall. Daniel did not hesitate. He moved to the weak figure, lifting them, shielding them. "Every life has value," he said simply. "To abandon the helpless is to abandon ourselves." The weak figure shone with light, dissolving the test. Princess Lyra's eyes filled with tears of pride, but the nobles were divided. Some spat in anger, others whispered with unease. The third challenge began, the trial of spirit. From the shadows stepped a figure holding a blade of fire. It struck at Daniel with sudden fury, testing his will to fight. Daniel dodged, blocking with only a staff given by the guards. The strikes came faster, stronger. The crowd roared for blood, but Daniel refused to give in to rage. At last, with a swift move, he disarmed the figure and held the blade to its throat. The hall fell silent. Daniel lowered the weapon and stepped back. "I will defend, but I will not kill for pride." The figure bowed and vanished, leaving only light. The chamber erupted. Some nobles shouted in anger, calling him weak. Others stared in disbelief, seeing in him something they had never seen before. But before Celera could speak, chaos erupted. From the crowd, a hidden assassin leapt, a blade aimed at the Empress's heart. Gasps filled the hall. Guards moved, but too slow. Daniel's body reacted before thought. He hurled the staff with all his strength. It struck the assassin's arm, knocking the blade away. He rushed forward, tackling the attacker before he could recover. The two crashed to the floor. Daniel held him down until guards swarmed and dragged the would-be killer away. The hall was in uproar. The nobles shouted, voices rising like thunder. But Celera rose from her throne, her voice cutting through the noise. "Enough!" Silence fell, her gaze fixed on Daniel. For the first time, her voice softened, almost warm. "You have shown patience. You have shown compassion. You have shown restraint. And you have shown courage. These are not the strengths of a conqueror. These are the strengths of a guardian." Princess Lyra's eyes shone with joy as she clapped her hands. Celera's gaze swept across the nobles. "You wished for a trial. You have had it. And before all, this human has proven his worth." The nobles murmured, some bowing their heads, others glaring with fury, but none could deny what they had seen. That evening, after the hall emptied, Daniel stood once more on his balcony, looking at the stars. His body ached from the trial, but his heart was steady. Soft footsteps approached. It was Celera. She stood beside him, the stars reflected in her eyes. "You risked your life today," she said quietly. "Not for power, not for glory, but for me." Daniel shook his head. "For you and for your daughter, and for peace. If I can give even a little hope to this galaxy, then my life is worth that risk." For a long moment, Celera was silent. Then softly she said, "Perhaps my daughter was right after all." From within the palace, Lyra's laughter rang out, light and bright. Daniel smiled faintly. But in his heart, he knew the greatest trial was still ahead. For while the nobles had been silenced for now, the warlords beyond the stars were gathering, and soon their challenge would come.